Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to share. Right, let me just get my bearings. Let's see where everyone is. I think I'll step back ever so slightly. Have you all had a good week? Yeah? What's your weeks like at the moment? Busy? Hectic? Oh yes, lots of busyness and hecticness going on. I feel like I'm in the middle of sort of conference season. Which is this like time of year when Christian leaders end up going to things that they're not really sure they want to go to, but end up going because they sort of feel they have to, and end up coming away so glad they went. That tends to sum it up for me. And also, me and my family are in the middle of moving house, which makes life even more stressful. And yeah. By the way, my name's Tim. I'm married to Emily, and we've got 4 kids. And we're at that season of life where our kids are leaving home and then coming back, which is ever so annoying. But we're hoping that as they leave, they're going to flourish in their leaving. But yeah, our 3 eldest, I think, are leaving home. So that's kind of mixed emotions there as well, because of course, like you, we love our kids. When me and Emily first got married, we thought, wouldn't it be great if our kids are leaving home in our mid-40s? So we started young, everyone, and it seems that little wish is being fulfilled. Do you know, once a year, our 3 eldest kids are consecutive in age. You feel sorry for my wife, if you like. So this year, our 3 eldest will be 23, 22, and 21. And it happens only for 1 month of the year. But I'd value your prayers as we kind of go through kind of change. My role has changed slightly within Festival. If you're not familiar with Festival Church, we're a church family of 7 congregations, which has grown over the past 8 to 9 years. And until last September, I was leading our congregation here in Chester, but took the bold step of bringing in some new pastors there so that me and Emily could just oversee things. And I'm still learning about this and how this goes, because everything inside me wants to interfere and meddle with everything that's going on the ground. But I'm not allowed to do that anymore because I'm kind of overseeing things. But it's good. And as Sue referenced, take on this new role with the Evangelical Alliance as head of the Evangelical Alliance in Wales, which is also a new thing. So definitely please pray that I don't go bonkers in the process of all this. But isn't it great to be together? I love God's church in all its diversity. I'm a pastor's kid. By now I should have fallen out with church at least once. And you know what? I never have. For some reason, I guess it's God's grace, I've always loved the church. I've had plenty of reasons and opportunities not to love the church, believe you me. But I think church is amazing. The people, the family of God, as we come together in moments like this, as we scatter from places like this, I think the church is amazing. And I feel we're always full of potential, aren't we? And there's always stuff that we could be doing for God. The way that we could be growing in our hearts and reaching out to the people around us. Always brimming with potential. And I love what God is doing through his church right here, right now. Isn't it? I find lots of things amazing. You might pick this up. I find it amazing that God chose us to live in the here and now. Sometimes I wish he didn't, but I think it says a lot about you, that God saw you before you were even born. I don't know how this works. I reckon in my mad imagination, we're all living in little jars in heaven. And God looks and thinks, okay, Tim, let's just make sure he's in Chester in 2023. Okay, there might not be jars involved, but I guess he looked at every single one of us. He looked at you and thought, you are just the right person to live where you're living now, in this time now, because God has every confidence in who you are. He's completely faithful towards you. That doesn't mean he's just always there. It means he's full of faith towards you. He has faith in you to be just the right person here today, living where you are, in your family, with your friends, you're just the right person in just the right place for God to work and do amazing things in you and through you. That was a great time of worship. For some reason, I started thinking about when I was on my paper round as a 13-year-old. I used to get up nice and early. I used to quite enjoy my paper round. Whenever I get up early these days, especially if I go on my bike for a bike ride first thing, I always remember my paper round with like rose-tinted spectacles, thinking it was amazing, but it probably wasn't. But I used to pray a lot on my paper round. I remember one person stopping on my paper round to ask me who I was talking to. So, oh yeah, sorry about that. Just kind of praying here. And God used to speak to me. And there was this one time, I used to collect marbles as a kid. We didn't have computers in our house. We had marbles and Lego. And I used to collect marbles, and I had this extra special marble. It was a purple one, and it was covered in glitter. It's brilliant. As I was cycling along on my paper round, trying to beat the bus, that's how I kept going, had to beat the bus to a certain point, cycling along, and I felt God say to me, this is what came to me while we were worshiping, that's why I'm sharing it. I felt God say to me, do you know what, Tim? You're like that glittery marble to me. And every one of us are a bit like that glittery marble to God. And maybe you're here today and you perhaps, I don't know, are perhaps feeling that you're insignificant or below par, I don't know. Not quite where you should be. God wants you to know today that in the midst of all the marbles, don't worry, I haven't lost mine, you're that purple glittery one. That's how special you are to him today. But today I want to share a little story from the book of Nehemiah. Thanks, Andy and Sue, for inviting me today. I love the coffees that I have with Andy. Thanks for your friendship, Andy, and your leadership. So when I got asked to come along, I thought, oh, this sounds good. And I was more excited when I heard that it's three kind of churches, congregations coming together. I feel that's quite special. I think God is doing something amongst you that you really need to push into. I think it can only grow. I think it's a hallmark of what God is doing in our nation today. So as I was thinking about, what shall I share? Almost straight away, I thought I should share something from the book of Nehemiah. I'm going to make the assumption, just because of time, that most of us know a bit about Nehemiah. I can give you a quick kind of overview. Nehemiah was an exile in the king's court, and he heard one day that Jerusalem's walls had all crumbled down and no one was doing anything about it. So he asked the king, do you mind, king, if I go and see what we can do about these walls? And basically, Nehemiah managed to somehow get everyone together to rebuild the walls. And they rebuilt the whole city wall in 52 days. It's quite good, isn't it? It's good going. I think the city wall was probably about the same size as Chester walls, to put it into a bit of context. And there's something about Nehemiah's leadership and God's anointing on the moment that brought these people together to do a great work. And again, I see moments like this when congregations, the churches are coming together to fellowship with one another, to perhaps work together. I begin thinking about Nehemiah chapter 3, which gives us a wonderful picture of all these diverse people coming together to build a wall. Now, they really were a diverse group of people building this wall. Let me just tell you about some of these people. I don't know why. I would like to have thought that Nehemiah, on needing to build this wall, would just get in touch with perhaps the builders and the constructors and maybe those who knew what they were doing. But it doesn't take long to read through who kind of got their hands dirty in the building process to realize there are people like you and me, another assumption here, who know nothing about building city walls. Here's a little picture of these people as they came together in Nehemiah chapter 3. What it starts off with Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100. I find it quite amusing. It's a priest building a wall. That feels like maybe like me, my kind of profession. We're not known for our DIY skills generally. Yeah, maybe we can lead some Bible studies. But it starts off with who I would think is the least qualified to do this. But God's calling upon our lives just requires our obedience. Verse 8, it does make me chuckle a little bit. It says, Uzziel, son of Hariah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section, and Hananiah, one of the perfume makers, made repairs next to that. Now, I don't want to stereotype professions even more than I've already done so, but can you imagine what their bit of wall looked like? It was the perfume makers. I'm assuming if anyone doesn't know how to build a wall, it's people that make perfume every day. But there we have it, some perfume makers. It was all genders involved as well. It wasn't just ones for the macho men. In verse 12, Shallum, son of Helohesh, ruler of half a district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. I think they enjoyed that. My daughters, they're both quite different. One's still in sixth form here in Chester. The other's in Papua New Guinea doing some humanitarian work. Ruthie in Papua New Guinea would love the idea of building a wall with me. Jemima, not so much. But I love the fact here's a dad with his daughters saying, come on, roll up your sleeves. We're in this together. Let's build this wall. Just a couple more. Verse 16, there's another Nehemiah turns up on the scene. I feel like he's a little bit kind of precise. I'm not always that precise. I feel like I deal in headlines and people around me deal in the detail of the paragraphs. Here's a paragraph guy, because I love the way it says, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, ruler of half the district of Ben-Zur, made repairs up to a point. Now, sure, it's stating a fact. There was a point. But I just love that little phrase, up to a point. I think, well done, Nehemiah. You did well there. Oh, verse 20. This guy sounds like a bit of a nutter. Verse 20. Baruch, son of Zabbai, zealously repaired another section. Wow. Zealously repaired a wall. Can you imagine that? I bet he was timing everyone on his crew, see how quick they could get the cement mixed. Okay, let's see if we can carry extra bricks, everyone, in twice as fast. One of those people that if you're like that, you love it. If you're not like that, you hate it. Here's this nutter building the wall as well. There's a few of those in all of our churches. Oh. One more, perhaps. Oh, these all make me laugh. I love, from verse 23, they're less zealous, it would seem, because Benjamin and Hassab made repairs in front of their house. They're not going anywhere far. They don't quite get this. Why do we need to do this? But, I'll show some willing, and I'll repair the bit in front of my house. Oh, it's such a great chapter of people deciding to work together, do life together, build something together. And in moments like this, when we're more than one congregation, when we're groups of families, I just love that picture that there's something we can do. There's a wall to be built. I don't know what your wall is that needs building. That's for you to identify and look at. But there will be a wall that you as a group of people are being called to build together. And I could just see a chapter being written about you all, where you're all being listed, just like those people in chapter 3 there, all taking your part, all doing your bit together in this wider church family, if you like, to do something great for God in this generation. But of course, it didn't just land there, did they? There seems to be some things that took place before chapter 3, chapters 1 and 2. And in chapters 1 and 2, there's some great things take place that kind of build up to this moment. It didn't just happen. People didn't just suddenly wake up one day in broken down Jerusalem and say, come on, guys, let's do this. Some things had to take place. I guess we could look at Nehemiah himself, how he was so saddened by what needed to be done. There are things in our world that I'm sure sadden you. They certainly sadden me. I feel like hear this in the right way, the older I get, the sadder I get in terms of my perspective on what's going on around me. I think, oh, Lord, surely there shouldn't be this much brokenness in my world, in our world. Surely, Lord, I should have seen revival by now. Oh, Lord, why is all this stuff going on? Lots of walls, I feel, need rebuilding. And maybe you've got some of that on your heart, a bit like Nehemiah, and you just want to do something about it. Oh, Nehemiah is a great character. I'd encourage you to read the book of Nehemiah and his life story. But Nehemiah had such determination to see this through. There's a great little phrase in Nehemiah 2, verse 11, where in the first person, Nehemiah says, I went to Jerusalem. I've just always overlooked that. I've got the bit where he talks to the king, says, King, I need to go back to Jerusalem. There's some work that needs to be done. And then I kind of get to chapter 2, and he starts working and meeting with people. I'd always missed that bit. I went to Jerusalem. Easy to overlook, only a couple of words. But in that one phrase, I went to Jerusalem, is at least 900 miles of journeying. Is at least 3 or 4 months on the back of a horse riding through the desert. I don't know why I've missed this. Maybe it's because I'm so ingrained in our generation that, I went to such and such and it's like a 3-hour trip in the car or something, or a quick plane ride somewhere. There was some determination and perseverance to see this through. Can you imagine those desert moments that Nehemiah would have had to endure? Because don't forget, even though he was working for the king, better to work for the king than live on the back of a horse in the desert, surely. 900 miles, at least 3 months of determination. Only just to go and see for himself what needed to be done. No real sense of, we're going to get this done. 900 miles to get to a place to assess the real crux of the problem. And Nehemiah, he's a canny chap. He spends a bit of time not really telling anyone what he's there for. Some wisdom in that, I guess. And goes on a night recce of the walls. Again, quite close to his heart. He's not bragging about this, or doesn't see himself as the Messiah, anything like that. But then we have a little conversation, and this is where I'd like to just kind of land things today. Don't forget, we're talking about how do we get to chapter 3? How do we get to this place where everyone's mucking in, whoever they are, in rebuilding the wall? So Nehemiah has just kind of done his recce. He's identified who he thinks could do this job. It's basically the people that were there. So he says in verse 16, he begins to talk to the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and then a nice catch-all, any others who would be doing the work. And here's what he says. I think he says 4 really important things. He says, then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king had said to me. Then we get some responses. We're not going to spend too much time on this. They replied, what a great reply, here it comes. Let us start rebuilding. Oh, yes. Nehemiah must have loved that moment. And all the people responded, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. Then we've got some characters turn up on the scene, just when it's all going swimmingly. But then Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it. They mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you've no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. That's the end of chapter 2. The next thing we read is the priest rolling up his sleeves and building a gate. So here's Nehemiah chatting to the people. Here's 4 things that really kind of struck me that he manages to talk about. The first thing, he clearly identifies the motivation behind their working together. For him, it was a problem. The problem was the walls had crumbled down, and as a result, the people were in a state of disgrace. I guess in a shame and honor culture in which they lived, the fact these walls were crumbled down and the graves of their ancestors would appear to have been desecrated, this was a big disgrace for them as a country, as a nation, as a people. And Nehemiah comes straight in and says, look, here's the problem, everyone. This is why we've got to do this. I think back to the story of Festival, my church family, as it were. One of our key verses in the life of us as a church is in Psalm 68, verse 6. It says, God puts the lonely in families. And I guess I'd started to see how not only were people often lonely, but churches could be lonely. Church leaders could be lonely. Congregations, lonely. And that verse, that line in Psalm 68, 6 still speaks volumes to me. God places the lonely in families. I've noticed that whenever I feel lonely, I make really bad decisions. When I feel lonely, my perspective on life around me isn't great. And you can just kind of broaden that out. It becomes true of groups of people, of congregations, and of leadership teams. But for me, that was kind of the problem. Oh, let's do something, guys, that deals with loneliness. So that we can be a church family that works together, supports one another, loves each other, makes decisions together, keeps our perspective and faith high as we encourage one another to see God do great things in our towns and cities and ultimately in our nation. God places the lonely in families. And Nehemiah managed to articulate the motivation for them as a group. Second thing he did, he also came up with a solution. He's a bit of a genius. He said, come on, guys, here's the problem. Here's what we're going to do. Imagine everyone was there with bated breath, even though it was obvious. So here's what we're going to do, everyone. Drum roll. We're going to rebuild the wall. Sometimes it takes someone to come along and state the obvious. Because surely all these people were living in that broken down city for years and years and years, but never did anything about it. Isn't it amazing how we get so used to the crumbledness downness of life around us when God puts the tools in our hands and his spirit inside of us to be the difference in the places that we live? I find it quite amusing that it was a simple solution. And I bet you could, if you were there, you'd see all the little light bulbs coming on. Everyone, oh yeah, never thought of that. Yeah, yes, let's do this. Why don't we work together? Why don't we live in closer fellowship? Why don't we give this a go? Nehemiah managed to articulate both the problem and the solution, almost in the same breath. And how did the people respond? They didn't respond with, oh yeah, you're right, Nehemiah, the walls are broken down. No, they responded with, oh yeah, let's rebuild. Let's do this. 2 more things, everyone, and then I'm going to be done. Because it's 2 more things that Nehemiah says, and I think they're quite important. Verse 18, I also told them about the gracious hand of God on me. At first, I thought that was a bit arrogant, if I'm honest. You know, that Nehemiah stands up and talks about how the gracious hand of God is upon him. It's not that at all. I think that we need to get better at identifying the grace of God on our lives for certain situations, for certain conversations. There's this kind of theological phrase that gets bandied about a bit in churches. When you hear conversations about the means of grace. The means of grace is a way of talking about how we experience God at work. So I would say that worship with us today as a means of grace. In this place of worship, you couldn't help but sense that God was at work here. And for others, it's not so much the worship. It might be the communion table. For others, it might be the preaching of the word, the means of grace. But I believe that God places a grace through which he brings his gift in on different groups of people for different things too. You can think about your life, think about how God has blessed you, some of the things that you're good at. We don't like to think we're good at stuff, but we are good at stuff, everyone. The things that God has blessed you with, maybe it's having good conversations with your neighbor or, I don't know, making loads of money for God's kingdom. Who knows? But God places a grace on your life for certain things, for certain times. He also places a grace on groups of people. So you as a gathered church family here, I wonder what God's grace is upon you. I wonder what the key is that you have that no one else has, because you're the ones who have the key to unlock some stuff. Just so that you kind of have a bit more of an idea what I'm talking about here. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Listen to this. This is Paul writing to a church, a bit like you guys, a bit like us. And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Here we are. The Macedonian churches seem to have a certain grace for something that other churches don't. About the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They exceeded our expectations. But since you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, complete earnestness, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. So the Macedonian church were recognized for this particular grace of giving. In the moment that Nehemiah stands up, he's identifying God's grace in that moment. He's saying, God's gracious hand is upon me, and it's to lead what's going on and to inspire you guys, he says. He doesn't say that exactly, it's my paraphrase, to build this wall. I wonder what God's grace is upon your life for this moment. And what's the grace that God's put on you as a church family for this moment? I think it's important. Finally, then we're done. He also said, but he talked about the gracious hand of God on him and what the king had said to him. I've thought a little bit about this phrase. I wonder why he thought that was important. I wonder if it's something about him articulating his accountability. So Festival Church, we've got 7 of us congregations working together now. And one thing we have to really clarify often is our accountability to one another. How are we going to work things out when things don't seem to be going quite right? Who makes the final call in certain situations? Because when you can nail accountability, there's kind of an authority in that to get stuff done, to be who God's called us to be. The temptation is to kind of shirk the accountability question, I think, because it's a bit awkward sometimes having to talk about things like that. But I think it's important that we do that. We're accountable to one another in what God's called us to do. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. Interesting that the first criticism that comes is criticizing their sense of accountability. They asked, are you rebelling against the king? Well, they clearly weren't, were they? Because the king had given them full authority and permission to crack on. But I do find it fascinating that it was Nehemiah's sense of accountability that was being criticized. Now, there's different types of criticism, isn't there? We should all, I guess, be open to criticism of one sort, positive or constructive criticism. The worst kind of criticism is criticism that's completely unfounded, isn't it? Or when our character seems to be being slated. And these guys, the critics here, that's the camp that they fell into. And in it all, Nehemiah was able to say, with faith-filled eyes, the God of heaven will give us success. And I think my prayer for you today is, as you endeavor to serve God together, pray that God will grant you favor and success in all that you do. Maybe revisit some of those things that Nehemiah said. What is the motivation? Why are we doing this? Okay, how do we do it? The solution. Oh, what about God's grace on us as a family? And for sure, how are we going to remain accountable to each other as we seek to follow him? I think that's me done. I'm just going to pray before I hand back. Yeah, let's pray together. Oh Lord, we love you. We love your word. Where would we be if it wasn't for you and your ways? Oh, thanks for calling us now to live for you. Even though secretly, Lord, sometimes I wish you'd call me to live 100 years ago. Thank you for the moment I'm in. And each of us, actually. Just the right people. To be salt and light. To spread the aroma of your presence wherever we go. To be that city on a hill that shines brightly. In the midst, Lord, of what just seems so chaotic, often, in a world that seems to be fragmenting, thank you that you're doing something that actually is calling us closer. Lord, thank you for everyone here, and we just open our hearts to you afresh. Yeah, where you're seated, why don't you just bring your heart before him. Holy Spirit, I think wants to just affirm his presence in your life in a new way, in a fresh way for some of you. The sparkly marble thing. God never told me at the time that we're all sparkly marbles. Oh, he values you today. Lord, we really sense your presence here. And we give ourselves to you afresh today. Yeah, in Jesus' name. Amen.